What are the eating window rules when you're intermittent fasting? Let's talk about that. So I lost 80 pounds with intermittent fasting, and I've been keeping my weight within a normal BMI range for over 6 years now. I only have a few rules for my eating window, but they've been basically the same since 2016. The good thing about these rules is that I've found that they work with practically any window. Now, I prefer OMAD, but I've also done 16/8s and 18/6s and 24s. Now, of course, I'm not a doctor, so this isn't medical advice, but I am going to show you what works for me. So the first eating window rule that I have, and it's really the most important one, it is the thing that because I have this rule, I've been able to stick with intermittent fasting and to keep my weight off for the long run. And that rule is I get to eat whatever I want in the eating window. Whatever sounds good, whatever is on hand, that's what I eat. I have no restrictions. I do not restrict carbs. I do not have rules about how many plates of food. I do not have any rules about whether my drinks can have sugar in them or not. If I want to have a Coke, I'll have it. If I want to have a shake and a burger and fries, I'll have it. But also if I want a salad with a nice herb vinaigrette and grilled chicken breasts and vegetables, I'll have that too. The reason why this rule is so important is that the way intermittent fasting works is the same exact way any other weight loss plan works. It just helps you to eat the right amount of food each day. And what I found for myself was that by allowing myself to just eat whatever I wanted in the window, I was able to actually eat the right amount. In the past, I'd always tried to restrict certain foods, like, oh, I can't have carbs, or oh, I gotta eat low fat, or whatever the thing was. And when I would have those kinds of restrictions, I just couldn't stop. I would just keep eating past the point of fullness. I never felt satisfied. And then as I started to study the people around me, the ones who did not have a weight problem, I realized they just eat stuff. They don't like think about these things. They hardly look at nutrition labels. They're not thinking about calories. They're not thinking about how many carbs. They just eat the food that they want. And so I decided to try that. And to my surprise, when I actually just ate the food and just let myself have whatever I wanted, no matter how bad that food was, I found that I could actually eat the thing, stop when I felt full, and then move on. And even crazier, I found that those things that I used to just kind of obsess about, like various cookies and cakes and pies, I realized I like them, I enjoy them, but they're not a thing that's in my mind all the time anymore. So I just eat whatever I want. Now, there is one caveat here. I do not personally eat a whole lot of highly processed food. Now, the reason for that is simply budgetary. It's expensive to buy prepackaged food that's been highly processed. I get a lot more bang for my buck if I buy, like ingredients like, meat and flour and sugar, and then I'll make stuff from that. But I don't go and buy a lot of box stuff. The thing about highly processed foods is based on the studies I've seen, it looks like people have a harder time really understanding that they're full, that they've really had enough calories when they only eat processed foods. Whereas if people just kind of stick with what you can make in your own kitchen, you tend to be able to understand like you've had enough food and now it's time to stop. So in other words, your results may vary if you eat a lot of processed foods. You may not be able to do it exactly how I do it. Now, my next rule, and this is the hardest one for me to stick to,
slow down.
I have always been a fast eater. When I was a kid, I was always being told, hey, slow down, the food's not going anywhere and that kind of a thing. And that continued on into adulthood. I would sit down and eat and I'd look around and everybody else is still eating, but I'm done. And sometimes I thought that meant that I was not eating as much as other people, but really the truth was I was eating a lot more and I was eating it a lot faster. The thing is, it does take time for your stomach to signal your brain that you've had enough food. So if you eat really, really fast, then a lot of times what you find is that you have overeaten. The problem here is it is really hard, or at least it has been in my experience, to just slow down. I attribute this to the fact that, for the first 30 years of my life, every time I sat down and ate, I was eating fast. So that's like such a well-ingrained habit that it's just going to take a lot of time and effort to undo that. But what I have found is the more I work on this, the more I enjoy eating, and also the better I am at stopping when full. The process for me really is just like every time I pick up the fork, I try to remember, okay, when I put that bite in my mouth, actually chew it up, think about what you're eating, and then, swallow it, and don't just shovel it in. Don't be a Wolverine. Rule number 3 is to pay attention and obey. So your body will tell you when you've had enough to eat. The problem is you may not be listening to those cues. Back when I was obese, I really didn't pay attention to those signals that were telling me that I was full. In fact, I was doing a lot of things that made it almost impossible for me to hear those signals at all. I, a lot of times, was watching TV or scrolling on my phone, scrolling through Instagram, and not paying attention to how much I was eating, what I was eating, or, how I was feeling, like how full was I feeling? Which meant that by the end of most meals, I felt overly full when it was all said and done. So one thing that has helped me is to kind of have some hard and fast rules when I was first learning this, and then also to work in some flexibility. Because in the long run, you're going to have times when you're eating while you're distracted. The TV is going to be on. Sometimes you're just going to be in places where there is a television. Sometimes, you may be just distracted by people around you. Now, these days, I prefer OMAD. But back in the day when I would do longer eating windows, one thing that really helped me was to make a firm rule for myself, which was I was not going to snack in front of the television. In fact, I made the rule really strict. It was if I wanted to have a snack, I had to actually put away, my phone. I couldn't have my phone. I couldn't have the television on. I had to go turn it off, and no music on or anything. I had to go sit in my dining room and eat my snack at the table. And that was very helpful because, for one, it showed me how often I had just been eating, a snack just because I wanted to distract myself. Like, I wanted that distraction. It was like a form of entertainment. But then during those times when I really did want a snack, when I actually was hungry, when I would sit down and just focus on the eating, I realized how often, I was able to just hear like, okay, you've had enough. And I was able to listen to that voice and obey it. So because of seeing how much it helped, I made it a rule for myself to limit distraction as much as humanly possible. Now, this doesn't mean that I never watch TV. Like, I will watch movies and have popcorn. I will have a snack, sometimes with my husband at night when the kids have gone to bed. And we'll have that snack while we're watching a show. But in general, when I sit down to a meal, it's without distraction. No TV, no phone, no work, just me and the food and my family. And when you get rid of those distractions, it's a lot easier to pay attention to those cues that your body is giving you, that, you are starting to feel full, that you've probably had enough, and that you need to stop eating. And then the second part of that is also difficult, which is once you notice those cues, to actually obey them, because sometimes I don't obey them. Sometimes I just rebel against it. And I'm like, no, I still want a couple more bites of this food because it's delicious, or, I just want it. So again, still a work in progress, but I have found that if I do that I end up maintaining in the weight I want to be at. And the last rule is to be grateful for the food. Now, you might think, well, why is that important for weight loss? And I found it actually really is. When I have focused on gratitude, just being grateful for the food, being grateful for every bite, it makes the whole process of eating just more enjoyable. It's a more relaxed affair. And when I'm more relaxed and I'm enjoying life more, I find that I don't stress eat as much and that I just end up eating the right amount. But if I veer off into being ungrateful and resentful, then usually that leads to me eating faster and too much food and gaining weight. So I just try to be grateful. I try to eat everything that's given to me with a grateful heart, no matter who gives it to me and what the actual food is. And I also try to remember to pray beforehand to thank God for the food. So there you have it. Those are my 4 rules for the eating window. Now, I found that as far as like length of windows, that doesn't really matter. What really matters is which one feels best to you, which one works the best in your life. What I found through experimentation was I prefer OMAD, but really the rules are still the same. Eat what you're craving, slow down, listen to your body's fullness cues and obey them, and be grateful. But I would encourage you to experiment and see what rules work best for you. And by the way, if you want more help with intermittent fasting, be sure to check out my book, The Laid Back Guide to Intermittent Fasting. It's got a 4.6 star rating out of 5 with over 700 reviews. So apparently, people in general find it helpful. And by the way, if you've read one of my books, please do go give it a review, an honest review on Amazon. It really does help me as a writer. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.